Welcome to Austin Stories. These are two of the most fun and enjoyable malicious compliance stories I have ever read, and I'm not just saying that. OP gets back at Karen the Boomer in a hilarious, funny, wholesome way. You gotta love it. And then OP runs his computer lab in a secret way that the 90s and 2000s kid in me would absolutely love. And don't forget, all the videos are in podcast form. Search the Austin Stories podcast on your local provider or check the description for a link. Be nasty to English as a second language folks who inadvertently use violent language? Now you're stuck with Memo Cannon, Report Crusher, and Document Hunter, posted by the Black Company Wiki. I was a freelancer for a media company that maintains a database for their videos, photo galleries, other digital property, as well as a separate bit for contracts and the like. One of the clients who struck a deal with them to utilize their IP was represented by a woman with serious bullying issues. Let's call her Boomer. She was a Luddite and rarely seemed to understand anything that was being said on the conference calls. So, I suppose to feel important, she acted like the grammar police and would interrupt her own boss's business partners and stakeholders in mid-speech if they said something slightly differently than how she wanted to hear it. Sometimes she did this multiple times in a single call. The worst was when she abruptly corrected English as a second language folks, like the group from India or the project manager from Germany or the account rep from Hong Kong. Really, any stakeholders from any non-Anglophone country who were still learning English. But on top of the grammar policing, she had a special fixation on correcting violent words and phrases. Now I'll give you some examples to follow. Now this is something that I would support to a degree, as I do try to avoid that language myself when I have the presence of mind to do so. Now there have been some fair-minded movements for years now, all basically calling for a reduction in this type of language. But Boomer never conducted herself in a way that was respectful of anyone about this. So for me, it's not about the nobility of someone's cause, it's about how you treat people. When someone casually said, "Shoot me a note," very common to hear, Boomer would interject, "Wait, why did you just say that?" You could hear a pin drop. The proverbial tumbleweed would roll through. It's hard to convey the total rudeness in a Reddit post, but this is tangible stuff. She would then pontificate briefly on why such phrases were unacceptable, and it's a shame we've not moved beyond this language. And then suddenly, it was crickets again, like we're supposed to go back to the topic at hand. Like she didn't just treat someone like scum for saying a very common phrase. It's such a disruption, and she never apologized a single time. The first few times this happened, people were stunned. People from all countries of origin and all age groups. The other boomers, the Gen Xers, the millennials, and the younger folks. This also extended to hunting-related words. The phrase, shooting fish in a barrel, and harmless phrases like deer in the headlights. When anyone said this stuff, she acted like she was being given carte blanche to be an entitled bully with anger issues for 45 seconds. Even the group I worked for, who got regular royalty checks from her boss, hated this. When she wasn't pulling these stunts, she was silent except for terse, distracted, soulless replies, and only when absolutely necessary. So to understate it politely, she earned only negative feelings from everyone. This came to a head. It turned out that the company was helping with a lot of her syndication and sublicensing docs and even cloud management free of charge. Now they did not have to do so, and it was not in the contract. This had been unofficially grandfathered for her by one of the senior sponsors, and only because Boomer was a Luddite. The operations guy who did some of this grunt work for her finally got insulted by one of Boomer's direct callouts. He said something like, "We need a dev who can hunt down the root cause." And she snapped as usual. So he categorically refused to do the work, meaning she would need to pay extra or get database access and do it herself like all the other clients. I saw a fun opportunity here and seized it. I volunteered to handle it for her myself until I could set her up with the necessary access, at which point she ultimately would use the same screens I use. She readily agreed, and this is where I think malicious compliance comes in. we made a customized interface for me to use and then gave her access to it. They were technically the same screens I use. There was a Brazilian IT guy who hated her more than anyone, and a girl in the creative department who commiserated with our cause. I sold them on my little plan, and one evening we made it happen. There was a duplicate web GUI, or GUI, graphic user interface, that had been created for testing or something, but was now disused. We decided to grant her access to this GUI, not the production or standard one, but with key verbiage and icons of violent language that we knew she'd hate, perforating the entire thing. The quick access bar that follows when she scrolls had these 6 beauties. Report Crusher. This was the reporting system she would be using 24 times per week. The icon was a vice with the paper getting smashed inside of it. If you look closely enough, the paper had the tiniest frown. Document Hunter. Instead of just search. The icon was a bullseye getting hit with an arrow. Shoot us a note. Instead of just contact us. The icon was a speeding bullet with an innocuous, chubby-cheeked smile and a baby-like expression. Memo Cannon. This was my favorite little contribution to the whole thing. It was always just a broken link. It never did anything except take you to a unique 404 message page with a teensy little line art drawing of a deer with antlers, his tongue sticking out, slack-jawed, and X's over his eyes. I just thought Memo Cannon was the funniest phrase I had come up with, and we knew it would stare at her in the middle of her screen for the next few years. The icon was a squat little cannon with a sparking fuse. Troubleshooting. Instead of just help, but the 2 OOs in troubleshooting were crosshairs. Wiki Change Patrol. This was worthless since it just linked to a recent changes page for a wiki full of deprecated docs that nobody consulted. But the icon was a gendarme-looking guy with a smacking huge baton into his palm. It also featured these gems. The cancel button for the reporting system said kill task instead of just cancel. We had a file deduping routine. We changed the text for that button to say, got time to kill? She didn't have any permissions to access this actual function, but she would be seeing this button each time she opened any document in the web viewer. There were a handful of spots where the IT guy put a splash of camouflage coloration. In the standard environment, these were all just dead spaces. He thought, I believe correctly, that camouflage would get her blood to boil. Before we granted her access to this wonderful Frankenstein, I permanently switched to the same environment and GUI so that I could say honestly, yes, these are the same screens that I use, which is what she agreed to. I hashed together a walkthrough in PDF that even a zombie could learn from using screen captures from the new interface, passed it along, and that was that. The fallout is a bit anticlimactic because I never got any calls from Boomer directly with feedback that I could savor myself. This is because she lured some gullible student to do the grunt work for her in an unpaid gig. So where I thought I'd be cherishing the apoplectic response firsthand, I actually wound up liaising with the disinterested teenager. But eventually, it did filter back to me secondhand that when Boomer finally saw the screen, she was livid. She called the account manager and demanded changes. The account manager and anyone else we knew was liable to get a call from her had been prepped beforehand for this eventuality and had access to screen captures which backed up the idea that what she was seeing was the normal interface. Absolutely no changes whatsoever were made. See, I just love this little story here. It's so awesome because it's harmless malicious compliance, but it's enough because it just gets to Karen here. inner core. It's stuff that she hates, but it's harmless stuff, and it's so fun to say. Like, instead of saying this button here, you can say memo cannon, or excuse me, memo cannon. It sounds like a video game announcer. I just love this story so much. OP, this was genius. I love your terms. I love your absolutely awesome stuff. That sounds like Macho Man Randy Savage over here. Dr. Disrespect, if you've ever seen that guy. Or if you go back to Ben Stiller in Heavyweights with Tony Perkis, or White Goodman in Dodgeball, they all have this same kind of tough guy voice here, and that's just what I picture reading these things as. Memo cannon, document hunter. I'm having too much fun with this now. Good job, OP. You cannot access this website posted by Zanies for All. Once upon a time, there were no iPhones, no Wi-Fi. Social media was MySpace, and YouTube was pretty much just a shell of its current self. The internet had just hatched from its egg and needed time to grow into what it is today. But as a kid in the early 2000s, that wasn't helpful when you wanted to play games now and in school, because your parents wouldn't let you play them on a weekday and you didn't have a Game Boy. So there I was, bored to death in the 5th grade because I didn't like school much, and that meant on Monday I'd have to wait 5 days to eventually get back to playing Star Wars Battlefront, the better version, not the new trash, or Burnout 3. As there was in most elementary schools, we had a computer lab. It was big enough to host one classroom of 40 students and then some, and we had state-of-the-art Dell computers with Windows XP. For the most part, we were limited to a few educational PC games, Microsoft Office, and the internet, which was limited by the firewall to just the educational sites and Disney's Flash games. They did have the Oregon Trail, but I was too stupid at the time to play it more than 10% of the way through without losing my money or everyone dying. The computer lab was accessible before school between 7 and 8:30 a.m., during 2 breaks, breakfast for 20 minutes, lunch for 40 minutes, and after school. The only problem was there was nothing exciting to play. I'd try every games website that I knew, but the result was always the same. Miniclip, you cannot access this website. Free online games, you cannot access this website. Newgrounds, you can't access this website either. Okay, fine. Nickelodeon, you can't access this website. I guess they don't like SpongeBob. One day, my older brother, the computer whiz, finds out about how to download Flash games from around the internet onto his local hard drive, which is as simple as taking the cookies from where they're stored onto your computer into an easily accessible location. Now, we start building a repository of all our favorite games from the internet, but the only way we can play them for now is on the weekends and through the Flash player. No matter, we have a repository, except at the time, I didn't really know what else to do with it. Honestly, I have my older brother to thank for a lot of this, since he was really into computers and the internet, because the next find was really important. Freewebs.com, the free website hosting site. There's only so much a 10-year-old can do with this, but I spent hours designing and playing with the website. I'd substitute game time with free website designing. It wasn't necessarily a video game, so my parents didn't mind me on it, and I found out that it wasn't a block website at school, so I'd just keep building websites in my free time. Once the website was finished, I'd build another, continuously improving and upgrading and designing with new combinations. It went on like that for about a week, and I'd have 5 free websites built in that time. And then I found out that you could upload Flash components on a page. Now imagine, you're 10 years old and you just found out that Pandora's box is standing right in front of you and you can do whatever you want to with it. What do? Keep it to yourself? Tell an adult about this newly discovered volatile power? Hide it and make sure nobody else can use it for evil? Close, but not quite. I embedded a healthy variety of Flash games on that page, from the really meaty ones like Drag Racer V3 and the Murloc RPG to some miscellaneous light ones. This was a trial run, after all. I just needed to know if it worked, and if it did, how far I could push it. I did my work and went to sleep a little early that night, because curiosity got the better of me more than staying up past my bedtime did. That next day, I walked into the computer lab right when it opened up, the only one to walk in, and went straight for the website to the page where I embedded the games. I remember being so anxious about whether or not it would work, and the uncertainty was nagging to me ever since the car ride to school. I just needed to know, would I be able to play those games? To put it simply, there wouldn't be a story if they didn't work. The games worked. Not all of them did, but they worked. Drag Racer V3 had a save function, so all I could really do was play arcade mode, which was fine with me, but just about everything else worked as I expected them to. The problem I did find was space on the website filled up quite quickly, and I told myself that night I would embed more games on the other sites I built. I'd focus only on games that I could play casually, not lengthy ones like Murloc, because if I couldn't save, then there was, really no point in playing them. By the time I left the computer lab that morning, there were 3 other kids. This trend would continue no matter when I went. I went home that night, fixing everything that I could. When I reached my perceived limit, about 20 small games on the main site, I would load more games to another site. Eventually, I would move to fixing each website so they were separated by categories like action, shooter, racing, and so on. But as far as I was concerned, it was a problem for future me. I'd go to sleep early again, be the first and only one in the computer lab, and be one of only a handful of kids that would stay there. That would go on for several weeks. One day, the computer lab was busier than usual, which was fine because that was 10 kids and I was guaranteed a computer I could sit down and play at. A group of maybe 3 of those kids saw me playing on my websites and, without asking for a link, just looking at the URL on my browser, they started playing. For now, it was just me and those 3 kids, and I really didn't think much of it. I went home that day just thinking about playing another game and switching up the website so I could navigate it easier. I went to sleep and got to the computer lab the next day, the first one there. A little while later, more kids started walking in. Day by day, there were more kids coming in. By the end of the week, it was half full. A week after that, no more than 10 computers were left vacant. Eventually, on the guest book, because FreeWebs had that to allow you to post comments on the site, I had commenters, everything from fans of the website saying hi to kids who wanted to play a certain game from a certain site. It became a thing where I would read the requests during the day, make note of what games I could actually add on what website, and then download them and replace them later that night. Months later, the websites I built packed that whole computer lab. Not even remember a day when I walked in late and there were kids watching each other play when they couldn't get a computer themselves. I couldn't even find one to get on, but adolescent me felt a strange sense of accomplishment and pride, seeing so many people recognize the work that it took to build something that they could all enjoy. Unfortunately, over spring break, the school district also recognized my work and rewarded me with a firewall notification the Monday I returned. I was upset, but I'm looking back on it, and I realized that I followed the rules so well that it caught the adults' attention. It was interesting because I wouldn't talk to anyone outside of me playing my games on the computer, but I felt like the mastermind, sitting in plain sight, who was the reason everyone was here. I don't think anyone connected the dots that I was the reason the computer lab was probably packed. It's probably not a great malicious compliance, but it is a story that I think about from time to time. Oh, no, OP, this is one of my favorite malicious compliance stories I've read to date. Honestly, this is the one before it, because I grew up through the 90s and 2000s as this OP did, so I relate to this, playing all the games and going online, RuneScape, having AOL, You've Got Mail, and all that. This is such a funny, wholesome, humorous story that if you grew up, let me know in the comments how old you are, because if you understand what this OP went through to get these games online to play them on computer past the Oregon Trail, you'll know this is such a wholesome story. It's great MC. He downloaded games he probably shouldn't have done illegally or whatever, but it's other than that harmless and a great story. OP, thank you so much for telling us this. I love it, man. Stupid boss fired for breaking child labor laws. Click the video on your screen so you see this insane fallout, and I'll see you in the next one.